So my presentation is going to be a little bit more a mix of humanities and computer science. But let me start with this idea of what it is that we're talking about when we're talking about creepy technologies. And is that really a problem? We're all on Zoom, and this is a random Zoom image. It's from the internet, and it's full of dogs. But was there a moment when you thought it might be at this event and looked for yourself in the images? Thinking about what's in your background, reflexively checking if your camera is still off, talking to a bunch of black squares is an interesting experience. But all of us have to manage whether what we show something in these kinds of Zoom events or we don't. When you join one of these, you never really know what the norms are. Will people turn their cameras on? Who's going to talk? How is that going to be managed? Zoom meetings force us to make choices about what to make visible, differently from going to a seminar in person. And there's a prize for participating in this event. For many, it's inviting a bunch of strangers to have a peek into your personal space. So many little moments of discomfort in doing this online webinar thing. And such Zoom experiences may have started out as a bit creepy back in spring, but most of us are probably more or less used to making the necessary trade-offs and to use this technology, in part because we have to. I'm not entirely sure why. Oh, here we go. So what's creepiness? Back some years ago, I wrote a paper about creepiness in technology. And we found at the time that creepiness is something people experience all the time when using technology, because most of our personal technologies are pretty creepy. It's like that uncomfortable, niggling little feeling of discomfort. And we've grown really, really, really good at dismissing it. And it's unavoidable because you have to show something of yourself, give something of yourself, use your mobile phone, use your laptop, and you're giving up some data to something for something, and most of the time you don't know what it's about. So my argument has become over time that our technology is not creepy by accident, it's actually creepy by design. It's creepy by design because we have to give up our data for things in order to participate, in order to be part of this society. The question is, okay, so what? Well, so what is kind of fun to think about, because this is the Department of Computer Science and technology comes with a lot of power. We've, in the last decade, seen amazing things. Virtual reality headsets, 3D bioprinting is coming online. Our students in computer science have developed tools to predict carbon footprints for algorithms. There's machine learning tools accurately detecting COVID-19 and X-rays. You've just heard an amazing talk by Mads. There's amazing things that technology can do. And yet, at the same time, there are some worries. Just recently, scientists come around and said, well, now we have AI that's smart enough to know when it can't be trusted. So we are not going to be worried about robots taking over. Well, that's a relief. But let's look at what happens when technology isn't so much about taking over, but it still makes us feel a little bit helpless. Helpless when you log into Facebook and see a clip that actually makes you feel terrible to remember things that you might not want to. Helpless when you find out that this lovely Alexa device, the Amazon Echo device that you have, actually allowed somebody else randomly to eavesdrop on your home. You had no idea, but Amazon apologized later. So today's Thursday in November, and since I spend quite a lot of my time in the US. Today is also Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving to all of you. And in the US, you have really interesting news articles that are coming out. And they're coming up and saying, well, Zoom will lift its 40-minute cap on Thanksgiving. So now you can have family time because it's digital. But then you should expect Zoom to crash on Thanksgiving. And here's some other video choices. You can save your virtual family gathering. There's so much power to technology, and a lot of times the technologies that become part of our lives can also create a sense of helplessness, a helplessness that you can't do things because this Zoom has crashed. For example, my internet connection might be unstable. I have no idea whether it is or is not, and whether you can hear me. There's nothing I can really do except for forging on. This is the problem. So part of the problem with digital technologies, the digital technologies of the everyday are built around assumptions of visibility. The more and better information will be a source of progress. Better data will lead to better knowledge. Data is always there to be collected and known. And many talks that you will hear today rely on data of different kinds to create different kinds of knowledge that will help in different ways. But there are different kinds of visibility, and the question often is, who gets to see what, when, and for what purpose? Because in the Zoom generation or a Zoom environment, sometimes you begin to see things and end up in situations where things are perhaps less comfortable than you would want. So just about a week ago, an actor was doing a call with a movie director and overheard him making fun of the actor's poor apartment tiny apartment and essentially being poor. That's one kind of visibility, an interpersonal kind of visibility, where we can manage with each other and perhaps share with each other. More recently, Microsoft 365 has produced something new as well. This is a productivity score that you can now obtain if you're using the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So all the data that goes into the use of all of the Microsoft products can now be turned into how productive you've been, complete with graphs. It's a different kind of visibility. It's a data kind of visibility. And both will make you potentially feel slightly uncomfortable in different ways and for different reasons. Technology is a kind of hope. It's a hope that technology will live up to its promises. We believe that technology will help us be better, do better, and beat the pandemic and get to that other side. But sometimes the hopes that come, they also come with negatives. The negatives potentially overlooked, potentially they're unexpected. But there's been so many unexpected and overlooked outcomes that we might not want from the technologies that are part of our everyday, that the question then becomes, what should we do? How do we minimize the problems and maximize the benefits? Over time, this became a big question. So the European Union has developed the set of ideas of responsible research and innovation. Here's a link to the responsible research and innovation tools, a way of thinking about how do we make technology responsible. Part of the idea is perhaps those of us that develop technologies aren't doing this responsibly enough. And perhaps there's different ways that we can fix this problem. Here's some tools. Here's some ways of thinking about it. The IEEE has developed a variable tome called the Ethically Aligned Design, designed to address concerns with machine learning and artificial intelligence. Again, this was an enormous Herculean effort of thousands of people around the globe coming together and thinking about what does it mean to be ethical as a technologist? How do you ethically design and develop technology? Not that we think that technologists are inherently just unethical and now they should become ethical, but that perhaps this is something that we also need to think about. I myself was part of developing the Nordic Engineers Stand on Artificial Intelligence and Ethics just a couple of years ago. And once again, we were looking to see what does it mean to be ethical in technology and how do you help people actually think about the potential problems of what they create. And I just finished the project last year called Virtue, Values and Ethics in Responsible Technologies in Europe, where we developed tools to help developers think about ethics, think about moral reasoning, and potentially do technology in a more responsible fashion. And yet, even when technology is responsible in many ways, done as responsibly as possible, it can often fail interactions with the social world. Now, Mikkel is going to talk about the Danish version of tracking, but let me just start with this idea that whenever we have big problems we're expecting and looking for solutions, and we're looking for solutions everywhere. One of these solutions now, in response to COVID, is how can we use technology to help? Back in the spring, Google and Apple got together and produced a framework to try and create something that would support contact tracing to help epidemiologists deal with the fact that people are getting infected. Notification is important, but do it in a way that's privacy preserving. Contact tracing has been around now for some months. And what we're seeing is that perhaps there's actually not a whole lot of evidence that they're helping to stop COVID. Why? Why haven't they helped? Well, part of the problem is that technology is creepy. Getting tracked is creepy. We're so used to worrying about it at this point that people are not downloading these apps. Another part of the problem is there's the idea of what contact tracing ought to do, but the reality of what contact tracing is and how it needs to be done is far more complicated than what this technology can accomplish. And finally, well, contact tracing is such a small part of what's going on with COVID as a social problem rather than only an epidemiological one. So while there's huge potential to technology, certain things need to be rethought. In some ways, there's a question whether contact tracing is in fact a problem that can be solved with technology. It's not clear that it is. So what is responsible in technology? In the last 4 years, I've been studying this for a while, and there's a profound sense of kind of disquiet and discomfort among technology developers because they want to create responsible ethical digital systems, but they don't know how and what it means. There are some ideas, and there's so many. How do you do this? So over the last 6 months, I've been doing a project with the IEEE and the Association of Nordic Engineers, and we identified 3 gaps. A translation gap, because how do you recognize whether something may be or may become an ethical issue if you are a computer scientist? An implementation gap. If you do recognize it, how do you address the potential ethical issue in practice and in code? And the accountability gap. Who is responsible when things go wrong, and how should they be held to account? None of this is clear. All of this needs to be figured out. There's some small steps forward that I've been doing since I've come to the University of Copenhagen. My position itself is such an effort. It's an effort to address the translation gap, and an interdisciplinary effort across faculties. I've also been asked to sort of add ethics to traditional technical courses, and so I've been working with the many people in the machine learning department to add ways of talking about ethics and thinking about ethics into the introduction to machine learning for the data science program, which has been a really interesting process. And I've been working with the science communication and science education department to think about how do you add critical computation thinking in high school. All these are small projects. They're small steps. They're small steps to rethink what do we do and how do we come to think about where ethics is and what it's about. DIKU is in the process of figuring out perhaps an artist residency program can be an interesting and useful thing to do more, and I think that it can do more than communication alone. So as part of a Marie Curie ITN project, we're going to have some more artistic ways of thinking about how do you change design and technology development companies for a digital future? And how do you rethink governance for ethics in AI? Because the thing is, we need to develop a different technical practice, a technical practice that is deeply technical, but also has a critical component. It may not be enough just to fix the current system. Instead, we need to admit that questions of responsibility and ethics are also technical questions. And they challenge the fundamental assumptions, conditions, and goals of computer science in some ways, and need to be taken seriously. And we also need to recognize that the fundamental issues of data infrastructures and platforms that are now part of our everyday, like Zoom or Google or the AWS, they all affect our capacity to make responsible and ethical choices despite our best intentions. And so in order to do this, in order to do technology critically and ethically, there are ways forward, but it'll take time to figure out how to actually come and question our own assumptions. Thanks.